Okay, we're going to get started with the Atlantic herring section. We still have a presentation being downloaded, but I think we can start, and hopefully that will be downloaded by the time we get to it. We'll start with the agenda, approval of the agenda. Are there any additions or changes to the agenda? Seeing none, the agenda is adopted by consent. Next, approval of proceedings from February 2016. Are there any changes or additions to the February 2016 proceedings? Seeing none, those are adopted by consent. Next, public comment, and this would be comment on issues not on the agenda, and that's important. We have a full agenda, we don't have much time, and we don't make good decisions when we're hungry, so I want to try to get through this. So is there anybody, oh, I'm sorry, we have a list. Okay, Sean, you're first. And again, something that's not on the agenda. Sean, are you in the room? Oh, there you are. And if you could identify yourself and what vessel or industry you represent.
Sean Rocket for the Western Sea. Glenn Robbins wasn't able to make it. There were 6 boats in the fishery this year, and for herring for next year, there's more boats that are saying are going to come. They're saying there's more boats going to come for next year, and we were trying to look at possibly doing historical participation or doing ITQs in the future for quota, and trying to slow this down with the boats that have been participating for the last 8 years, and saying only for 1A.
Thank you, Sean. And that opportunity to speak on that later in the meeting, you'll have that opportunity. Next is Jenny. So you want to pass at this time, Jenny? Okay. John Connolly. You going to pass? Thank you. Boy, I can't read the next one. Coffin. Pass. Thank you. And Daniel Phil.
Yes, I'm Daniel Phil. I'm a Maine native. I've been in herring fisheries since 1982, 35 years. We need to address drastically the 1A anyway area in a control date. If we add more boats to the mix, things could get worse as far as the assessments, and there should be a limit on new entrants into it, and if the boats haven't had to utilize this fisheries, they shouldn't be able to just jump into it, because it would hurt people like me and the other boats that have weathered out a low quota every year for all these years. We need to address when we can do stock assessments. That is quite vital. This year, I've been doing this since '82, and I've never seen so many fish, and it's gotten more and more every year in the last 8 years. But this is a very important issue. We ended up low quota, and more boats got into it, and we self-regulated at a Maine state level with a certain amount of poundage per week landed. And we needed to do that because normally there's 4 boats that fish that area during June 1st to October 1st, the seine only zone. But 2 more boats got into the fisheries, and that cut what I make back by 30% in my crew. And my crew are all state of Maine natives, as well as the other seiners. But we need to address, and probably in all areas, 1B, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, whatever, of all these latent permits that are not being used, because they can theoretically just throw a net on and jump into any zone and go. I just feel bad about historical participants that will be hurt and have weathered out the low quotas. And once and if the assessments ever get done, analyzed, and we do go up on a quota, this is going to make a lot of other boats just jump right into it. There's 38 Category A all access permits, federal, out there, and God knows how many B permits. So this is going to have to be addressed, and it's going to have to be addressed very soon, or we're going to have a big mess coming up. You know, I would rather think ahead and get things done or started, because politics is a slow thing from the way I see it. So if we can get this on agenda, and maybe we can save a headache later on the next year or two. Thanks.
Thank you, Glenn. Last one. Boy, I can't read the writing. Biggin? Robbie. Pass, thank you. Okay, next on the agenda is election of a vice chair. Dennis Abbott.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to nominate the gentleman from Rhode Island, Mr. Mark Gibson, to be the next vice chair.
Is there a second to the motion? David Simpson. Any objection to the motion? Seeing none, you're on board. Thank you. Next on the agenda is the review and discussion of the white paper on the fishery performance and alternative management tools that are possible going forward. Ashton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to walk through the Atlantic Herring Area 1A fishery performance and alternative management measures for the section to consider today. The white paper that was included in briefing materials and this presentation focus on effort in the inshore Gulf of Maine, known as Area 1A, from June through September in the 2015 and 2016 fishing season. For reference, the coast-wide Atlantic herring annual catch limit is divided amongst 4 management regions. The quota for each management region is called a sub-ACL. ASMFC's Atlantic herring section manages Area 1A. It is the focus of this presentation. However, I will also touch on Area 3 as well. The section can distribute the Area 1A sub-ACL to best meet the needs of the fishery. The actual splits are set as part of the annual specifications process. Since 2009, the section has split the Area 1A sub-ACL into trimesters as shown, where 0% of the sub-ACL is allocated to January through May, 72.8% is allocated from June through September, 27.2% is allocated from October through December. The section also utilizes days out of the fishery to slow the rate of Area 1A harvest so the seasonal quota can be spread throughout the entirety of each trimester. The phrase day out originally meant one could not fish or land on that particular day, rendering it a day out of the fishery. At present, it refers to a no landing day. Prior to each trimester, section members from states that are adjacent to Area 1A, which includes Maine, New Hampshire, and Massachusetts, with input from stakeholders, set the number of Area 1A landing days per week via a days out meeting. At each Days Out meeting, the Atlantic Herring Technical Committee provides projected landing day scenarios based on the catch rate from the previous 3 years. The states adjacent to Area 1A agree to the start date, the number of days out of the fishery per week, as well as the consecutive days of the week a vessel can land Atlantic herring. So, for example, 4 days out would be interpreted on a weekly basis, meaning 4 consecutive days out of each week will be no landing days. If states cannot agree to the specific days, then the decision will go before the full section at the next ASMFC meeting or at a special meeting of the section called by the chair. Adjustments to the days out can only be made if the states hold another meeting or conference call. The majority of the Area 1A sub-ACL has been allocated during the months of June through September, also known as Trimester 2. This time period largely overlaps with the peak months for lobster landings as shown in this figure. Herring is the most widely used bait type for lobster traps. So this table shows the landing days during Trimester 2 of the Area 1A fishery from 2011 to 2016. At the start of the season, managers make planned landing day adjustments based on fishery performance from previous years. At times, managers have to make reactionary changes in season to increase or decrease the landing days based on the amount of seasonal quota that is available. I've noted when reactionary changes were made. In 2011, 2012, and 2014, managers gradually increased the amount of landing days such that the Trimester 2 ended with 7 landing days to ensure the seasonal quota was harvested. In 2013, the season opened with 7 landing days and was restricted to 0 landing days at the beginning of September. In 2015, managers planned to gradually increase the amount of landing days, but instead the fishery was restricted to 0 landing days at the end of August. In 2016, the section planned to gradually increase the number of landing days in June and July. However, higher than expected landings in the latter half of June resulted in landing day restrictions in mid-July and mid-September. In 2015, the rate of landings accelerated in August such that the seasonal quota was exceeded on August 28th, triggering a 0 landing day scenario for all of September, a peak month during the lobster fishing season. This figure illustrates the 2015 monthly Atlantic herring landings by management area. Area 1A is in blue, Area 3 is the purple line, and you can see Area 2 in the earlier part of the year is in orange. The Atlantic herring landings from June through September came from Areas 1A and 3. In 2015, herring landings in Area 1A sharply increased during the month of August. During the same time period, landings in Area 3 dropped to 0. The Area 3 landings likely dropped due to concerns related to the haddock catch cap. 63% of the haddock catch cap had been harvested by midwater trawl vessels directing on herring in July. The lack of Area 3 landings in August disrupted the flow of herring to markets and put more pressure on Area 1A. On August 26th, the Commission scheduled an emergency days out call to discuss the increase in Area 1A landings. Ultimately, the sudden increase in effort in August could not be diminished by decreasing the number of landing days. Rather, the Area 1A fishery moved to 0 landing days on August 28th. For context, I've compared the 2014 and 2015 landings by month and management area. As one can see, the 2014 herring landings in Area 1A and 3 increased simultaneously to meet the needs of the bait market, whereas the 2015 landings in Area 1A and 3 are inverse of each other. If Area 1A is the sole supplier of herring for the bait market at any one given time, as it was in 2015, then there will likely be supply issues. The Area 1A quota alone cannot provide enough supply for the bait market. The 2016 fishing season started with limited herring in the freezers. The above-average landings at the start of 2016 and thereafter led to emergency restrictions for vessels landing in Maine on behalf of Maine DMR. These measures were more restrictive than those of the Commission. This figure illustrates the 2016 monthly Atlantic herring landings by management area. Area 1A is the blue line and Area 3 is the purple line. The 2016 Area 1A Atlantic herring fishing season opened in June, and the landings quickly rose to double the expected value. For example, 3 weeks into June, the fishery was projected to have harvested 1,300 metric tons. However, 2,800 metric tons had been harvested. During June through August, the peak lobster season, the primary source of Atlantic herring landings was from Area 1A. Similar to 2015, but earlier in the season, Area 3 landings became stagnant, which put more pressure on Area 1A. Therefore, landings in Area 1A increased to address the bait shortage. Area 3 herring fishermen reported finding some Atlantic herring schools, but they were intermixed with haddock schools. This was likely a deterrent to fishing in the area because the Georges Bank catch cap was exceeded so early in the 2015 fishing year. So the increase in the number of carrier vessels has rendered the days out program less effective in controlling effort because vessels can transfer a large amount of harvest to carrier vessels at sea, allowing harvesters additional days of fishing beyond the days that are open to landings. Acknowledging this practice in an attempt to extend the trimester 2 quota into September, Maine DMR implemented a series of emergency rules that were more restrictive than those of the ASMFC regulations. They included a weekly landing limit, restricted landing and fishing days, as well as at-sea transfer restrictions. DMR's measures only applied to vessels landing in Maine. New Hampshire and Massachusetts only implemented one of these management measures, the 3 consecutive landing days. The Area 1A fishery moved to 0 landing days on September 18th of 2016. So the following 2 slides provide alternative management measures given the recent concerns during the 2015 and 2016 fishing season that have been reviewed in this presentation. I'll briefly review each bullet and we can have more discussion later on. So for this first slide is alternatives that apply more to effort controls. So the section can modify the Area 1A in-season allocation, modify the days out program such that landing days are no longer consecutive, modify the days out program to restrict fishing days in addition to landing days, modify the days out program to create a weekly landing limit. In addition, harvester vessels are limited to making at-sea transfers to only 1 carrier per week. All carrier vessels landing herring are limited to receiving at-sea transfers from 1 vessel per week. These are exactly the same as the Maine DMR regulations from this year. The section could restrict a vessel from operating a vessel using a different gear mid-season in Area 1A. The section could choose to clarify what it means for states to agree on the number of days out in the fishery. Does this mean a consensus or a vote? If states cannot agree, what is the default landing day scenario? 7 landing days? I'll also say that these are just the suggestions that were brought forth by commission members to me prior to this meeting. So that's where this list originated. The management measures on here are specific to small mesh bottom trawl vessels. The section could choose to modify the days out program such that the small mesh bottom trawl fleet could have a different allocation of landing days and times that are separate from the purse seine and midwater trawl fleet landing days. The section could set aside a percentage or value of the Area 1A sub-ACL for the small mesh bottom trawl fleet. Those are the alternative measures that were brought forth at this time, and now I will accept questions.
Thank you, Ashton. That was an excellent presentation of a very complicated fishery for those that have not been involved in it on a regular basis. I'd like to start out first with questions just on the history of the fishery, that part of the presentation, before we get into the management options going forward. So are there any questions on the history of the fishery and what's happened in the last few years? Okay, great. Going forward, questions on the management options that we could look forward to going forward prior to commenting on them. So are there any questions of clarification? Okay, now I'll take comments or ideas or motions going forward on these management options. Terry.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Ashton, for a bucket load of work. Really appreciate you providing us with a concise and clear report. I mean, certainly there's been a changing trend, and it's provided a lot of challenges for us in the subsection of the herring section to balance out our days out. For whatever reason, the trawl fleet out in Area 3 has not been able to access fish out there. And we are at the tipping point of addressing some capacity issues in the inside part of Area 1A. So I have a motion to initiate an addendum, and it's going to be very close to approaching a violation of the David Pierce rule. So if you can get up on the board. Yeah, Pat informed me I exceeded it. But what I'm going to move is I'm going to move to initiate an addendum to improve the performance of the Area 1A Atlantic herring fishery. The purpose of this addendum is to develop additional management alternatives for the landing stay program, and these measures will include. You don't have the. So, I'll let you catch up.
Then why don't you hold up, Terry, until she can get that on the board. Thank you.
Okay, number one, much of the proposed measures here are built off of Maine's emergency rules in the attempt to work with our goal to spread the landings out throughout the season and to provide an equal playing field. First alternative is mandatory daily reporting with two options: Category A, B, and C permits, and Category A and B permits. Number two, modify the days out program such that the small mesh bottom trawl fleet with C and D permits could have a different allocation of landing days and times that are separate from the purse seine and midwater trawl fleet landing days. Number three, modify the program to restrict fishing days in addition to landing days for purse seine and midwater trawlers. Two options: Category A, B, and C permits, and Category A and B permits. Number four, modify the program to create a weekly landing limit, pounds or trucks, for purse seine and midwater trawlers. Two options: Category A, B, and C permits, and Category A and B permits. Number five, modify the program to restrict harvester vessels making at-sea transfer for purse seine and midwater trawlers. Two options: all carrier vessels landing herring are limited to receiving at-sea transfers from one vessel per week, and the second is no transfers at sea. Number six, modify the program to implement a tiered weekly landing limit for Category A and B permits. Number seven, modify the program to allow for set-aside percentage or value of the Area 1A sub-ACL for the small mesh bottom trawlers. Number eight is to modify the program to restrict a vessel from using different gear types during mid-season within Area 1A. And number 9 is to clarify what it means for states to agree on the number of days out the fishery. Does this mean a consensus or a vote? If states cannot agree, what is in the default day landing scenario?
Thank you, Terry. I think David would have been proud at that motion. Is there a second to the motion? Doug Grout, thank you. Discussion on the motion. Terry, you want to start out?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is a suite of alternatives that have been discussed by industry. I understand very clearly that some may or may not be able to be done within an addendum, but the absolute intent is to have something definitive in place for the 2017 fishing year. As our collective staffs work together to develop the meat, put the meat on the bones of these measures. Some will fall out, some will be perfected, some will be amended. But we need something in place of different, and we need additional tools in the toolbox than we have right now for this coming year.
Anybody else? Doug?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Clearly, this particular year we've just been through has been a great challenge, and It's been, we should definitely give the state of Maine great credit for the rapid and quick responses they made to be more conservative than what was provided for in the plan. And I think it's important that we start at least considering trying to codify some of these in our ASMFC process so that we can try and make sure that there is a supply of bait coming out of 1A, the supply of herring coming out of 1A is spread out over the major lobster fishing season. Another issue that's been near and dear to the state of New Hampshire, but also applies to some vessels in the states of Maine and Massachusetts, is the small mesh bottom trawls, which account for have roughly about 1% of the total harvest out of 1A, and they've been had to abide by these days out rules, which were really designed to try and constrain the directed fishery, which is responsible for 99%. And it's been to the detriment of these small mesh bottom trawls, which are essentially day boat fishermen that go out and catch a small amount of herring every day, and having the ability to only go out a couple days a week is just not making them viable, when most of them are already constrained by small mesh bottom trawl restrictions in the groundfish fishery, which means they can't even start fishing until July 15th of the year, and they're restricted to the areas, very specific areas where they can fish, where they have low bycatch of groundfish species. So they're already constrained much more than the directed fishery. So I'm hoping that as part of this that we can kind of move them off to the side and let them fish and catch their 1% while we try and direct our efforts at constraining the major source of herring within 1A, coming out of 1A, so that we will have a consistent supply coming throughout the entire period 2 quota.
Thank you, Doug. Bill Adler.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Terry, number 8, could you go back to that number 8 and explain what that means?
Go ahead, Terry.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for the question, Bill. This number 8 is a resultant of some conversations I've had with industry that are concerned about a vessel changing their gear type in the middle of a season and moving into Area 1A. You know, as we work within a section, we make our projections at the beginning of the year. We try to determine, for instance, the number of landing days, and if any of these other alternatives are available for use. It might be the number of pounds landed. It would allow the section to be able to better plan how to be able to parse out the available quota if we have some information in hand at the beginning of the season.
If I may.
Go ahead, Bill. Follow up.
Yeah. Yes. In other words, they basically, if they're midwater trawlers, they can't halfway through the year change to a purse seine to come in. Is that what you're getting? You want them to sort of declare you are going to go in here as a purse seiner or not? Is that it?
Well, I'm not going to express my opinion upon whether or not about the trawlers or not, but this would be an alternative for the section to decide if they wanted to know what the population of vessels was going to be that we're going to fish within in a year. They would know that there would be X number of purse seiners, and should the trawlers declare that they want to fish in there using purse, and as they are more than legally allowed to do with purse seine fishing gear, it would be nice to know, from my perspective, how many we're counting on at the beginning of the season.
Actually, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I agree with that. Okay, thank you.
Dan.
Yes, as you know, I'm sitting here on behalf of David Pierce, so I have a lot to say on this. I support this motion.
David would have been disappointed at that response. Any other questions? Before I go to the public, I just want Ashton to quickly go over the timing of this process to make sure the public understands their opportunity to give input to this going forward, as well as today.
I did want to hear back from, I'm going to present a proposed timeline, and I did want to hear back from the section on the feasibility of it. So if the section does move to approve Addendum 1 to Amendment 3 today, then the PDT could develop this addendum and then present it to the section at the February meeting. I would then solicit public comment during the spring. So from like February, March, and April, I would come out to the states and solicit public comments on these management options. Then in May, the addendum would be presented back to the section again, as well as the public comments. And then where this then comes in the time period where I need the section to provide input, because then the season starts June 1. So that's a little less than a month after the section might possibly approve this addendum. And is it possible for these management measures to be implemented that quickly, and should we rush it, or should we give a little bit more time and bring the addendum before the section in May instead of February?
Thank you, Ashton. Now I'll open up for public comment. Mary Beth, did you have your hand up?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I did sort of have a question relative to the wording of the motion, and the gear type declaration sort of raised it to me, in that I think there needs to be clarity about what time period we're talking about. If you make a gear declaration for the year, are you doing it for a specific trimester, for the entire year? What is meant by that particular measure, and perhaps some of the other measures as well? Is it for, if we have differential landing days for small mesh bottom trawl, would that be for the year versus for the trimester, perhaps on the gear type? So the motion is unclear on that particular point. I think that would be all I had at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you. Terry, would you want to respond?
Yeah, I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman. I was having a sidebar. Could you rephrase the question?
Go ahead, Mary Beth, if you want to.
Sure. Terry, I was just commenting that this issue of declaring a gear type for the year with the trimesters, that creates some specific issues, and was it really the intent of the motion for a gear type, which I'm not sure I support, but I'm not going to comment on that at the moment, for just the second trimester versus small mesh bottom trawl, differential days out could perhaps be an annual consideration, and I think on those particular points the motion is unclear.
Terry?
Yeah, good question, Mary Beth. Thank you for that. My intent, at least for a trawl vessel coming in, would be for a declaration for the trimester 2 period only. I certainly understand trimester 3 and 1. There's going to be fishing effort elsewhere. You're going to go where you need to go.
Thank you, Terry. Anybody else from the public? Go ahead, sir. Okay, Jeff.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, or good afternoon, members of the section. I'm Jeff Kalin with Lund's Fisheries, and we have 2 midwater trawlers that we carry fish with in the second trimester and try to harvest fish in the 3rd trimester in the Gulf of Maine and try to get to Georgias when we can. And as everybody knows, we're trying to get some flexibility around the haddock catch cap at the council so that we can avoid, the 7-month shutdown that we had last year and the kind of timid activity this fall where we were staying away from the herring on Georges because there was so much haddock that couldn't be distinguished from the machines, and we're investigating different techniques we're talking about an SK project that would have cameras on the boat so we could actually see whether the fish was a haddock or a herring and so forth. It's a very complex problem that we're trying to resolve, but I don't want to comment right now, but there were a couple of questions I had about the data in the document to help analyze some of these options. I'm supporting the motion. Obviously, it's a broad motion, and we'll have a lot of time to pick it apart. But specifically, Ashton, on Table 5 on page 10, I don't really understand why the years used are 2000 to 2007, because it doesn't really tell us what's going on today. And as you pointed out, 2009 was when the trimester system was developed. So it's my recommendation. It seems to me that you'd want to analyze this with the more current years, 2009 to 2016, to see what's really going on, including reports of catches by state and catches by gear type. It could be that the state, providing information by state may be confidential, possibly, but I just don't think that the 2007 analysis does much for us in trying to parse this apart. So I guess that's a question to you. Why did you choose that time period to do the analysis of the harvest levels during the period of concern?
Thank you, Jeff, for the question. So I did not choose those dates for this. So these tables were actually included in Amendment 2, the previous amendment, and this is what the section put in there as how they would like to look at setting the annual specification process. We could do the trimesters, which was what we've always done since 2009, or there's these bi-monthly quotas that we could do as well, which the TEC has some strong concerns as to how we would manage it using bi-monthly quotas. But regardless, this was carried forward from Amendment 2. There was not a specific request from the section to change the allocations in these for Amendment 3, so therefore it was just carried forward.
Well, I guess in my view, they're the wrong years to analyze. And similarly, we're sympathetic to the small mesh bottom trawl issues that are embraced in this motion, but here again, it's extremely difficult to analyze the situation as a member of the public. We don't have any information on small mesh bottom trawl catch by permit. Are they D permits? Are they C permits? Are they landed in Massachusetts? Are they landed in Maine? There's, how much latent effort is there in that category? To what extent are we encouraging a directed fishery, moving away from an incidental fishery? So, I just think before it goes out to the public, Mr. Chairman, I'm making a recommendation that whole issue be analyzed in a lot more detail, because it's, I'm sympathetic, as I said, but it's difficult to understand exactly what's going on, Mr. Chairman. So I think I'll stop there. I appreciate the opportunity to make comments. And the other thing I'll say is I hope that there's an opportunity for an AP meeting or a call in the timeline that was described by Ashton. And finally, I'll just say it's a nice piece of work, Ashton, and I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. There is the plan to flush out more of the details on the small mesh bottom trawl, so that certainly will be part of the addendum, so there'll be more information coming on that. And I would believe that we will have an AP meeting in this process.
Good. I understand it's early, and I appreciate the opportunity to make some comments. Thanks.
Yep. Thank you, Jeff. Anybody else from the public? Go ahead, sir. Oh, I'm sorry, Jenny. I couldn't see. I saw a hand back there. All I could see was a hand sticking up. Sorry.
Thank you kindly, Mr. Chairman. So I assume that we will have time, once this goes forward. And I think the only thing I want to pick on right now, or hope we possibly will have some input in, is the carrier situation and only being allowed to have vessels put, choosing their carrier. I still think it's really not a good idea to be encouraging that situation. We've always done done a really good job in Maine of sharing fish so that we're not killing, dumping. Sorry, people cannot guess exactly how many they have in their seine, and I still think that between the fact that you're already limiting, carriers are going to be a thing of the past pretty quickly here, because you're asking the vessels to choose, making less money by giving fish to their carrier that they've loaded for years and years, and then now only saying, Danny might have extra fish that he'd be willing to give away so that the fish, live instead of dumping them, but no, he can't because that's not his designated carrier. So I hope we'll have an opportunity to discuss that more and maybe be a little more wise about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Jenny. Anybody else? Go ahead, sir.
Yeah. Yes, Daniel Fell, Heron Shana Western Wave. Yes, I'd like to confirm what Jenny is asking about the transfer to a carrier or a seiner. As a seining captain, in the way the schools of fish have been, and there has been a lot of big schools, much of the time season this year and last year and last prior years, if we try not to get big sets of fish, and I've been doing this for 34 years, and I do a lot of different things that are not even by the books to try not to get extra fish. But sometimes it's just in the cards, you can't help it. And I'm not getting any monetary gain from transferring fish to Jenny's carrier or another seiner, but it's a good way to keep the fisheries going, because I know another seiner will set for a couple trucks and they'll end up with getting as many fish again as what I just dumped to the bottom, and we all basically know what we're all doing. We're not doing it for monetary gain. Maybe it's more glory than anything, but we always try to figure that at some point throughout the summer, we gave fish away to this boat, it'll come back. At daylight, we don't have our full trip and another boat has extra fish in their pocket they can't use. Instead of dumping it to the bottom, they'll give it to us. And it's worked this way since I started in '82, so if we can really address this and try to keep me and a lot of people honest. Thanks.
Thank you for your comment. Terry, you would like to respond?
To that point, to both Danny and Jenny's comments about carriers, it's certainly not the intent to eliminate carriers. What is there is being proposed is a full range of alternatives. As you guys know, we had a pretty extensive conversation that involved reporting and enforcement on how to move ahead during this past summer's fishery. And we're going to be looking between now and February for other alternatives to get in this document that's going to work for the fishery. So I'm hoping that should this move ahead, that we'll have that discussion, put out operationally viable alternatives that will help. It will help us manage the fishery. But we've got to be crystal clear. If we have additional seiners coming into Area 1 next year, there's going to be less fish to divvy up, and how we do it is critically important to all of you. So that's what I'm trying to get, is something that evens the playing field and keeps you guys working.
Thank you, Terry. Anybody else from the public? Go ahead, sir.
Yes, I'm Glenn Lawrence, herring carrier Double Eagle. Been carrying herring Gulf of Maine since 1929. And we're talking a little bit about carriers here, and I'm not really sure where I'm going to fit in here anymore. Probably it's on the way out, it sounds like. But and the way things are going with the pie, so we talk about a pie in the Area 1A, which is really a slice of the overall pie for the overall TAC. I'm not sure what the percentage is, maybe roughly 20%. And the more boats that are coming into this fishery in the area 1A, this past year, I was pretty much, I'm out of it. I don't get anything unless the seiner that I'm work with and have been working with for a long time allowed me to take some of the fish that he could have carried himself. And I can only see it getting worse the more pressure that's put on Area 1A, more boats coming in, quotas being cut down per boat. And that's about it. Just figure I have to say something because I guess I'm the oldest carrier in the fleet, but hopefully we can do something to make a future for us all. Thank you.
Thank you for your input, and there will be additional times for your input going forward in this process. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
Anybody else from the public? Seeing none, back to the section. Any more discussion, questions? Bill?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. What is the possibility that we could move along with the timeline that was just described? In other words, I guess drawing up an addendum, if it's approved to be drawn up, come back in February, hash out stuff, then go out to public hearing in the spring, back in May for perhaps final approval. Is that a realistic thing?
I guess there's a couple of parts to the answer to that, Bill. A few of these may require federal participation, and then the other part would be how fast the states can implement some of these. So at this point, I guess it's unclear whether we can, if we pass it in May, whether all the regulations that we pass could be in place for June 1st.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do suggest that we don't make this too complicated. I mean, the white paper was very good, but it had a couple of things in it. I go, are we going to get into this stuff? It's going to get buried. So the idea of the simplicity to make it move a little faster, I think, would be productive.
I agree, and to the degree that you can make this complicated situation that we can explain it to the public in a simple manner. I mean, Ashton worked very hard in her presentation, but it's, as you know, it's very complicated in how this fishery's been prosecuted this last year. So, but we certainly will try to keep it as simple as possible. Anybody else? Doug?
Well, just to respond, at least from the state of New Hampshire standpoint of how quickly we could implement some rules that would to be in compliance with whatever we decide here. I will tell you first of all, it would take, we could probably get most of the rules in place in less than a month. Not much less, but less than a month. But some of the things in here that are being contemplated, for example, having differential days for small mesh bottom trawls, we really don't have to have it in place until July 15th because they're not allowed to fish until July 15th in Area 1 in the small mesh bottom trawl area off of Ipswich Bay. So. But some of them, it may be a challenge to get it in for New Hampshire by June 1st, but pretty close. I don't know about Massachusetts, and I can only, or Maine on this, but.
Thank you, Doug. Terry?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I mean, good question. Maine actually has a number of these measures already in place. And once the section finally comes up with a decision, hopefully, you know, I'm in, you know, we need a decision in May, and Maine will implement through the Commissioner's Emergency Rulemaking Authority whatever measures the section approves. It's our intent that we have an even playing field, and with most of the boats landing in Maine for the primary market, we don't want to see our boats leaving, going down to another port, and playing by a different set of rules. So we trying to provide bait for the lobster fishery we've been here advocating for all week long.
Dan or Bill, you want to comment?
Yeah, we can do most of this either by permit restrictions or emergency action if we have to, and with the approval probably of our Marine Fisheries Advisory Commission, which pretty much meets monthly anyway. So Massachusetts would probably be able to get on the ball.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A question, I guess, perhaps for Ashton or maybe our representatives or commissioners from Maine. I'm just wondering why there isn't much of a catch from Area 1B or 3. Is it that the herring aren't there? Is it the haddock bycatch issue? Is it that the vessels aren't set up to fish out on Georges? I'm just wondering if there's so much effort in 1A, why some of that doesn't spill out into 1B or 3. Thank you.
Terry, you want to take that?
Sure. Thanks, Emerson. You've been lucky enough to been well removed from the Atlantic herring politics. But the body of water that, in the Gulf of Maine is Area 1A, and it's the states of Maine, New Hampshire, and Massachusetts that share the landing stay responsibilities for that second trimester fishery. 1B and all the other areas are not regulated through the section. This section is, specifically regulates the landing days for Area 1A.
Thank you, Terry. Emerson, I'd add to that the Area 3 situation, as was discussed by Ashton, that the haddock bycatch has, in the last 2 years, has created a situation where the landings from Area 3 have been drastically reduced, and that's part of what caused this problem in 1A. So there wasn't the bait flow from Area 3 that in past years had been coming in. So, and we're not sure that that's going to change, even though the haddock cap is going to be raised. We're still not sure what the landings from Area 3 will be. So, Bill?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to continue with what you just said, apparently the way it works out there is if they can find the herring out there, it's good. But if they catch too much haddock and they exceed the cap, the area is closed by the federal government to herring fishing, even if the herring quota in Area 3 has not been taken. If the haddock catch has capped, then they're out. And as far as 1B goes, it looks very nice. It's a nice big area with, I forget now what exactly the quota is, 2,000 pounds or something. I don't know, some small thing. If they find the herring in 1B, which is outside of 1A, then it can get closed. And I think it was a year or two ago it closed real quick. They found some herring out there, and that was the end of it. So that's a problem with Area 1B and 3.
Thank you, Bill. Anybody else, or are we ready to vote on this? Okay. We need a caucus, 30-second caucus. 30 seconds. Okay, if we're ready to vote, and does the motion need to be read? Or emailed. Okay. We will send you a David Pierce email. Is there any objection to this motion? Seeing none, it passes unanimously. And go ahead, Bob. I guess I would add the understanding is that we're going to proceed with all due speed with the intention of a May approval. Go ahead, Bob.
Yeah, this is just a follow-up on that idea, a plea to have the PDT members that are on your staffs, make some time available. There's the notion of keeping it simple may have already gone by the wayside, given all the wording on the board. So, any help we can get and Ashton can get would be great. And there is that coordination factor with the council. We have to figure out what areas of overlap we're going to have to deal with those folks. So it's a lot of work to do between now and February, but we'll push as hard as we can.
Great. Thank you, Bob. Okay, next agenda item and last is setting the 2017 specifications for 1A. Ashton.
Okay, so I'm going to briefly talk about the Area 1A specifications. So in previous years, or at the 2015 annual meeting, the section approved the Area 1A sub-ACL as part of the 2016 through 2018 specs package. There's a 3-year specs package. Just for knowledge, the Area 1A sub-ACL of 30,300 metric tons represents 28.9% of the stock-wide ACL. Since 2009, the section has split the Area 1 ACL into trimesters, where 72.8% is allocated from June through September, and 27.2% is allocated from October through December. For the 2016 fishing season, 95% of the trimester 2 seasonal quota was harvested. The fishery then went into trimester 3, where the Area 1A fishery closed on October 18th of 2016. So with that, I'll take questions.
Any questions? Do we have a motion? Doug.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I believe Ashton has this, or Amy has it. I move to allocate the 2017 Area 1A tax seasonally with 72.8% available from June through September and 27.2% allocated from October through December. The fishery will close when 92% of the seasonal period quota has been harvested, and underages from June through September may be rolled into the October through December period.
Is there a second to the motion? Terry. Any questions or comments on the motion? Seeing none, is there any objection to the motion? Seeing none, the motion passes unanimously. Is there any other business to come before this section? Bill.
Are we planning to do the usual meeting of the section to determine, starting June 1, what happens? I mean, is that, we're still on target for that stuff, right?
That's correct, and we'll pick out a date when that gets closer. Thanks for that, Bill, though, for reminding us. Any other business to come before the section? Go ahead, Mary Beth.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mary Beth Tooley, O'Hara Corporation, and this motion just brought to mind a couple of things relative to specifications, and the Commission, meets jointly with the New England Council in setting the 3-year annual specifications, and that's been a good process that's worked well. However, we have rollovers on an area basis from year to year and deductions for any overages for any sub-ACL, and so the numbers actually change. They don't stay the same during the 3-year period. And I was just wondering, does the Commission make those adjustments as the federal plan makes adjustments, or not?
Yes, every year those underages or overages, as well as the 3% RCA and 295 fixed gear set aside, are deducted with the federal government.
So, so that's good to hear, and that doesn't take any action by the commission. It's just an automatic. You update your numbers based on that.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other business? Seeing none, it's time for lunch. We are adjourned.
The lunch is actually served if you go out these doors, straight up the steps. I think it's on the left-hand side, part way down. So grab lunch. We'll try to get the lobster board still started at 12:30. You can either eat lunch, actually bring lunch back in here.